I once had a secret romance with my best friend's brother. Later, I broke up with him. A year after our breakup, we met again. His cold and distant demeanor shattered as he cornered me and kissed me for what felt like an eternity. After finishing my part-time job, I headed back to school. By the time I exited the subway station, it was already 11 at night.
I should take the shortcut through the alley, it'll save me some time.
As I turned into the alley, a tall figure passed by. Our eyes met briefly, and there was something familiar about his gaze. Exhausted, I kept my head down, watching my shadow move forward. Unconsciously, another shadow appeared beside mine.
Is someone following me?
After the third turn, I was certain I was being followed. I looked around. The street lights were old and dim, and this was an industrial area with few people around, especially at night. To make matters worse, I turned into a dead end. Just as I was about to call for help, the two shadows merged, and a hand landed on my shoulder.
Who are you? What do you want?
My breath caught, and I screamed, only to have my mouth covered immediately. Fear took over my mind. I turned pale, trembling uncontrollably, and even started to convulse.
Hey, calm down. I won't hurt you.
The hand covering my mouth loosened slightly. I tried to call for help, but my voice came out hoarse and shaky, sounding more like a growl. The assailant stepped back silently, watching me warily. My mind went blank, and without support, my legs gave out, and I collapsed to the ground.
Please, just leave me alone.
Overwhelmed by fear, I trembled violently, my hair falling messily over my face. A scream echoed through the alley, and the assailant's eyes widened in terror.
Are you some kind of zombie?
Panicked, the assailant fled. Watching his retreating figure, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and lay motionless on the ground. After a few minutes, I propped myself up, only to hear footsteps approaching.
No, not again!
Danger! I immediately fell back to the ground, starting to convulse and twist again. The footsteps stopped. I peeked up and saw someone standing at the corner of the alley, tall with long legs, arms crossed as he leaned against the wall.
Alex, your acting has improved a lot.
His deep voice carried a hint of amusement as he looked at me. That familiar voice. I picked up my glasses from the ground and saw his face clearly.
James? What are you doing here?
I didn't respond, awkwardly wiping my tears and using the wall to help me stand, limping towards him.
Are you crying?
We've been broken up for so long. There's no need to show concern for an ex.
I wasn't crying. I just felt unlucky, being followed and injuring my leg, and then running into my ex at my most embarrassing moment. I leaned against the wall, silent, my nose stinging as tears flowed uncontrollably. James suddenly fell silent and pulled me into his arms.
It's okay to cry. It's not embarrassing.
I then realized that the figure I saw at the street corner earlier was James. James and I had broken up over a year ago. He graduated last year and started his own company, quickly becoming very successful. Even in college, he was quite famous, good grades, great at sports, and many admirers. The most important thing was that he was handsome and had a great physique.
I still don't know what came over him when he agreed to my confession. At that time, I felt incredibly lucky, like the heroine in a novel, pulling James, this unattainable flower, down from his pedestal. But in the end, James was like a hard bone that couldn't be chewed. Being with him made me feel like a sycophant, without any dignity. So, I straightforwardly sent him a message. Let's break up. Even a dog knows to discard a bone it can't chew. I'm smarter than a dog.
Without waiting for his reply, I immediately blocked him. Since then, I hadn't seen James, though I still heard about how much money he was making and how many beautiful women were flocking to him. But I had already sealed my heart with concrete. Despite my best friend Emily constantly praising her brother and asking if I wanted her to introduce him to me, no one knew about my romance with James except the two of us. Lying on James's back, I felt a bit dazed and quietly rested my head on his shoulder. James suddenly stiffened and adjusted my position.
Have you been living on cold tea this past year since we broke up? How tough must your life have been to become this light?
So, are you feeling sorry for me?
You're overthinking it. I don't need you to meddle in my business.
When we reached the dormitory building, I asked James to put me down, but he ignored me. Some passers-by recognized James and looked at us with curiosity. Embarrassed, I buried my face in his back and messaged Emily, asking her to come downstairs and help me.
Brother, what are you doing here? Hello, sister-in-law.
Emily, it's me, not your sister-in-law.
As soon as I spoke, James's hands supporting me suddenly tightened, startling me. James then put me down, and I leaned on his arm to stand up.
Thanks for today.
The person in front of me remained silent with a cold expression, which I was already used to. I hobbled towards Emily.
Are you two hiding something from me?
Nothing, I just fell, and he was a kind passerby.
I'm not that kind.
I glared at James and bared my teeth at him. James remained expressionless, staring straight at me.
Alex, I don't need your thanks. Just take me off your block list.
When I came out after taking a shower, Emily was already waiting on my bed.
Come on, spill it. What's going on between you and my brother?
I sighed helplessly.
Nothing much, we dated for a semester, but it wasn't public.
Emily, looking like a judge, stared at me seriously. I had no choice but to explain everything.
Wow, Sarah, or should I say, former sister-in-law, you're something else.
How can a failed relationship be impressive? We only held hands for a semester. If I had known we would break up, I would have taken more advantage of the situation. Now, I just regret it.
Who would have thought my brother would end up like this? No wonder he was so irritable last summer and kept asking why I didn't bring friends home. Turns out he got dumped.
What was said casually had a deeper meaning for me. It seemed I had left quite a shadow on James. No wonder he didn't show me any kindness today. Well, someone as outstanding as him wouldn't easily accept being dumped. Feeling annoyed, I opened my phone and removed James from my blacklist. Immediately, a message came through.
James, are you asleep?
I am. Do not disturb.
After more than half a month of recovering from my leg injury, I was feeling restless. Emily thoughtfully gave me a ticket to Sunset Lake Park. Feeding fish while sitting on a boat was something I had always wanted to do. I used to imagine doing it with a boyfriend, but now I realized I could do it with anyone. When I arrived at the park entrance, I saw James there too. I squinted at Emily, giving her a meaningful look. Emily laughed heartlessly and even made an excuse to go to the restroom just before boarding the boat, never to return. James rowed the boat while I stared blankly at the water.
Is your leg better now?
James suddenly spoke, and I nodded absent-mindedly. The boat stopped in the middle of the lake, and James handed me some fish food. I threw the food into the lake one by one, and soon, many fish gathered around. The fish were very lively, with several even jumping out of the water, splashing my dress. I ignored it and continued feeding the fish. James grabbed my wrist, and I looked up at him. He cleared his throat.
Your clothes are getting wet. Maybe you should stop feeding them for now.
I stopped throwing the fish food and lowered my head. Suddenly, a fish jumped up, and feeling annoyed, I reached out and caught it. Under James's puzzled gaze, I slapped the fish hard.
This slap is for splashing water on me when I'm feeding you. This slap is for being so cold and ungrateful when I've been so good to you. This slap is for making me almost move on, only for you to come back and mess things up.
The fish struggled in my hand, and I felt ridiculous for getting angry at a fish. James took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders, releasing my wrist.
let's buy this fish and make fish soup.
James suddenly suggested, and I looked at him with teary eyes. This man, his good looks would be the end of me. Feeling frustrated, I released the fish back into the lake. James didn't row the boat, just stared at me silently. Feeling uncomfortable under his gaze, I grabbed the oar beside him and rowed back to the shore with all my might. Relying on myself was better than relying on a man. During the Qingming holiday, I went to visit my mom. Unsurprisingly, her tombstone was unattended. I squatted in front of her tombstone, crying until I lost my voice, pouring out all my pain and grievances. At some point, it started to rain. When I looked up, I realized someone was holding an umbrella over me.
James, you've become quite the busybody this past year.
I promised you I would come with you to see your mom.
Late affection is worse than nothing, James. You have no right to be here.
I let out a small laugh, knowing James's feelings for me felt more like pity than affection. After a long silence, I struggled to stand up. James reached out to help me, but I pushed him away. It rains every Qingming festival, perhaps because my mom misses me and sneaks down from the heavens to see me. I stood in the rain, arms wide open, head raised, embracing the rain passionately. James stood behind me, watching me with a blank expression, like a spectator. It was like a scene from a movie, but we were not lovers, not even friends. After that rain, I had a fever for several days, my mind in a haze. When I groggily opened my eyes, Emily was sitting by the bed, looking at me with concern.
How are you feeling? Do you want some water? I'll get you some.
Emily clumsily brought a cup of water close to me, and I managed to take a sip. When I looked up, James was standing at the door, observing me. Our eyes met, and I quickly looked away. I struggled to get up, but James held me down.
Alex, when did you become so disobedient?
James, I told you, you have no right to control me.
The tension was palpable, and Emily wisely left the room, closing the door behind her. I tried to shake off James's hand, but I was too weak. Looking up at him, his brows furrowed tightly. After a year, I hadn't had a good look at how he had changed. Perhaps it was because he had entered the workforce, he seemed more mature, his presence more commanding, almost oppressive. Seeing him angry scared me, and my eyes reddened.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lose my temper, but you can't neglect your health.
James, what am I to you?
James suddenly froze, his gaze complicated as he looked at me, then he leaned in close.
So you never knew I thought?
I'm not a mind reader. How could I possibly know what you're thinking?
With that, I quickly burrowed under the covers. That was close, I almost let my heart waver. Ever since I met James, my life had been a mess. My mind was in turmoil, and Emily kept mentioning James to me every day. So when Emily invited me to the bar, I agreed without hesitation. I just didn't expect her to use the same trick again.
Hey, let's go to the bar tonight. It'll be fun.
Seeing James in the corner, I quietly walked to the opposite side. There was a girl sitting next to him, which didn't surprise me. Someone with his looks and money never lacked female attention. But that girl was my half-sister, Sarah.
Hi, James. It's so nice to see you here.
Sarah had always been the wild one, yet she had a face that looked pure and innocent. With just a few coquettish words, she could get all sorts of rich guys to pay for her. Like her mother, she lived a realistic life and had everything she wanted. In contrast, I, the silent one, ended up with nothing. The more I thought about it, the more upset I became. I hated this awkward version of myself and downed several drinks.
Let's play truth or dare.
Watching Sarah get close to James made my heart ache, so I averted my gaze and stared at my drink. The bottle spun a few times and finally pointed in James's direction. The guys around were good at stirring things up, looking at James and Sarah with mischievous grins.
James, how about you pick any girl here to drink a glass of wine with you?
My hand tightened around my glass, and I took a big gulp of wine. How ridiculous, watching my sister, who had taken so much from me, flirt with my ex-boyfriend. What a melodramatic scene. The guy handed James a full glass of wine, and James took it, scanning the room.
Oh, James.
Sarah looked at him with eager eyes, covering her mouth and smiling shyly. I lifted my head, watching the two of them, sipping my wine.
Alex, would you do the honors?
His deep voice called out to me, raising his glass as a signal for me to come over. This was unexpected. I put down my glass and walked over. Standing in front of James, I turned to Sarah.
Sorry, sister, could you move over?
Sorry, sister, there's no room.
Sarah sat still, with her bag occupying the seat next to her. I chuckled lightly, giving her a disdainful glance. Taking the glass from James, I sat directly on his lap. James stiffened, his narrow eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses staring at me intently. The glass pressed against his lips, but he didn't open his mouth. Annoyed, I grabbed the glass with one hand and pinched his cheeks with the other. His lips were forced open, and I poured the wine into his mouth. James looked surprised and choked a few times. The wine trickled down his mouth and into his shirt. The room fell silent. Many people at the table were there to ask James for favors, and now they didn't dare make a sound. I put down the glass and stood up, only to be pulled back by him. James's face remained expressionless, which I hated the most. It always felt like I was performing a one-person show in front of him. I tried to push him away, but he restrained my hands, holding the back of my head and pressing his lips to mine. Caught off guard, I gasped, and he took the opportunity to deepen the kiss, the sweet wine swirling between our lips. The kiss felt like a formality and ended quickly. James coldly told Sarah to move, and the little flower finally obediently shifted over. I sat where she had been, with James's arm around my waist. He seemed like a different person. Even if he didn't like me before, he wouldn't have done such things. But now, he acted recklessly. After this chaotic scene, everyone wisely stopped the game and went back to drinking and chatting. I thought James would tone it down, but he remained unchanged throughout. Only Sarah occasionally glanced at me, giving me a provocative look. Feeling drowsy, I leaned my head on James's shoulder, my mind hazy. The junior who had been pursuing me for over a month, David, invited me to the amusement park, and I agreed. The end of semester pressure was immense, and life was a mess, so it was a good opportunity to relax.
I'll go get some water for you.
David went to buy water for me while I sat on a bench in the amusement park. A clumsy bear mascot walked towards me, blocking most of the sunlight.
Thank you, Mr. Bear Knight.
It opened its arms to me, and I stood up to hug it. It was a big bear, very tall, and its embrace felt safe. When I was little, my mom often brought me to this amusement park, and I always wanted to hug the Bear Knight.
Alex, when you grow up, you should find a boyfriend like the Bear Knight.
But now, things had changed, and nothing seemed perfect anymore. Suddenly, my nose tingled, and the Bear Knight patted my head. With red eyes, I buried my head in its embrace.
Senior, does it feel good to hug? I want to hug too.
I let go, and the Bear Knight reluctantly released me. David opened his arms to hug the Bear Knight, but it stepped back and made a no gesture. I couldn't help but laugh and took a big sip of the soda.
Senior, it doesn't want to hug me. Can I hug you instead?
I opened my arms to give him a comforting hug, but the Bear Knight blocked us. I looked at the Bear Knight suspiciously, and David tried to get around it, opening his arms towards me. Before he could hug me, David found a bear head on his own head. The Bear Knight had put the headpiece on him, who was now fumbling around.
Alex, you can't hug other men.
James, why are you everywhere?
Suddenly, Emily's face flashed in my mind, and I felt a sense of despair. David took off the headpiece, looking confused.
Senior, who is this? Your friend?
I'm her boyfriend.
Correction, ex-boyfriend.
An ex-boyfriend is still a boyfriend.
Caught in a stalemate, my amusement park trip inexplicably turned into a trio outing. A little girl saw me standing with two guys and excitedly tugged at her mom's hand.
Mommy, that sister has two boyfriends. I want to have two boyfriends too.
Kids say the darndest things. I covered my face in despair. But despite everything, I felt surprisingly good. Roller coasters, pirate ships, bumper cars, after a full set of activities, I felt like a new person.
Senior, you should find a young boyfriend. Older guys can't keep up.
James's face turned visibly green, and I couldn't help but laugh.
You're right. A boyfriend should be young and fit. Older ones just can't keep up.
I emphasized the words "can't keep up" and took David's hand for another ride on the roller coaster. James sat on a bench, glaring at us with helpless anger. The final exams went smoothly, and on the day of the holiday, I dragged my suitcase alone to catch a ride home. Emily saw me off at the school gate.
Safe travels, Alex.
As luck would have it, we ran into my dad, who had come to pick up Sarah. He was pulling Sarah's suitcase with one hand, carrying a large bag with the other, and had another bag slung over his back. Sarah followed behind him, and they looked just like a real father and daughter. For the first time, I saw such a loving smile on my father's face, a smile he had never given me. I kept my head down and didn't look at them, but as I passed his car, I was called out.
Alex, aren't you going to say hello when you see me?
I sneered and looked at him coldly.
You're such a busy person. I'm afraid you have to think hard to remember who I am.
Emily quietly asked me who he was.
Who is he?
A stranger.
Unexpectedly, this stranger comment infuriated him. He walked straight up to me and slapped me without mercy. I didn't have time to react. My face burned with pain, my head turned to the side, and I couldn't help but laugh.
Why are you so anxious? What's there to be anxious about? Are you a monkey, John? When you see my face, do you think of my mom and get itchy hands, so you can't wait?
His face turned red with anger, and just as he raised his hand again, a pair of long hands grabbed his wrist. It was James.
Mr. Song, what are you doing here?
John fawned over James, not forgetting to give Sarah a look. The father and daughter immediately started fawning over James. I became invisible again. Emily cautiously tugged at my sleeve, and I smiled at her.
Are you okay?
The farce ended, and I silently walked away with my suitcase, while James was still surrounded. I hung my head, feeling suffocated, and suddenly wanted to buy a plane ticket and leave this place forever. After walking a dozen steps with my suitcase, the footsteps behind me grew closer, and soon I was enveloped in someone's embrace. He held me so tightly that I couldn't breathe, and my eyes turned red.
James, I don't want to embarrass myself in public.
Okay.
He let go of me and led me into the car, with Emily driving. I kept my head down, tears welling up in my eyes, one drop after another falling on the back of my hand.
Alex, come spend the new year at my house. My parents would love to have you.
I had nowhere else to go, no home to return to. A tear fell, and I mumbled a quiet okay.
Okay.
James's parents, Robert and Linda, were indeed very kind. Emily hadn't told them much about my situation, only insisting that I spend the new year with her. On New Year's Eve, after dinner, I went into the kitchen to help Linda with the dishes.
Alex, can I call you that?
I nodded lightly. Since my mother passed away, it had been a long time since anyone called me that, and for a moment, I felt a bit dazed.
My Emily never really grew up. We spoiled her too much, so she's a bit of a brat. If she bullies you, you have my permission to set her straight.
I couldn't help but laugh. Emily was indeed very innocent, but it was this innocence that showed she had grown up loved.
Auntie, Emily is very good to me. She takes care of me more than I do her.
After all, Emily was a year older than me, and she often treated me like a younger sister. Initially, I was a bit reserved, but after a few words, I gradually relaxed.
Alex, are you seeing anyone?
The sudden change in topic caught me off guard.
She's not seeing anyone right now.
I turned around sharply to see James standing by the fridge, holding a bottle of soda.
You must have taken the wrong medicine today. Usually, you barely say a word, and now you're butting in.
Linda gave James a suspicious look and continued chatting with me.
So, Alex, do you have anyone you like? Auntie can introduce you to some nice guys.
I looked at Linda, a bit embarrassed, and nodded politely. Then I noticed that James, holding his soda, hadn't left the kitchen and was listening to our conversation. Linda recommended a bunch of high-quality men to me, and James's expression grew darker and darker.
Why are you eavesdropping? Don't you have work to do?
Linda noticed James's presence and quickly shooed him away. As he left the kitchen, he gave me a meaningful look that sent a shiver down my spine. Robert and Linda went out for a date, and Emily and I set off fireworks in the yard.
Alex, close your eyes and make a wish.
Emily excitedly covered my eyes, and I clasped my hands together.
Mom, the new year is here. Alex has grown up and has to face the world on her own. Even without my little bear knight, Alex can take care of herself.
Unknowingly, my eyes reddened, and I sniffled, looking at the fireworks filling the sky. Emily brought out a 3-liter bottle of red wine, and we sat on the sofa, drinking and chatting.
Alex, what's your relationship with Sarah?
She cautiously probed, and since I had already come to terms with it, I spoke openly.
When I was about to enter middle school, my dad suddenly demanded that my mom give him a son. But my mom was already older, and she refused, which led to domestic disputes. In the end, my mom got pregnant and had a difficult labor. My dad got his son, but my mom stayed forever in the year I turned 12.
Emily listened quietly as I spoke.
Sarah was my middle school classmate. She used to be called Jessica. In our first year, her mom, Helen, remarried my dad, and she changed her surname. It's funny, really. My biological brother prefers Sarah and resents me. Even at a young age, he knew how to say the most hurtful things. Watching them be a happy family while I felt out of place, I applied for boarding school. Every time I came home during the holidays, I felt like an outsider.
The red wine was almost gone, and I poured another glass.
When my mom passed away, I no longer had a home. Emily, I don't have a home.
My head felt a bit dizzy, and when I looked up, I met James's gaze. He was standing at his bedroom door, just like when we met again, arms crossed. Cold and distant, with a look that warned people to stay away. On impulse, I opened my arms to him, and he stood there motionless. I got a bit angry and frowned at him.
Are you going to leave me too? Can you not leave me alone? I'm so scared.
James walked over to me and leaned down to hug me. A hug, my favorite thing. I lazily nestled into his arms, rubbing comfortably, and James stiffened immediately. He tried to let go, but I held on tighter.
James, you jerk. If you bully Alex, I swear if I could beat you, I'd punch you right now.
Yeah, punch him.
I weakly punched James in the face, and he remained expressionless. I got even angrier and tugged at his face.
James, I hate this look of yours the most. Cold and expressionless, you're like an iceberg that can't be warmed. I don't want to like you anymore.
Then who will you like?
His voice was unnaturally hoarse. He carried me towards the bedroom, and with each step, I clung to him tighter to keep my balance. When we fell onto the bed, I muttered,
Then I'll like a junior. Juniors are cute too.
I lay on the bed, grabbed the blanket, and stretched comfortably. Meanwhile, James stood by the bed, his mood dark, laughing angrily.
Little drunkard, I'll deal with you tomorrow.
When I woke up, I was groggy, staring blankly at the ceiling. An unfamiliar bedroom in gray tones, but the scent on the pillow was very familiar. When I walked out of the bedroom, there were 3 people sitting in the living room: Robert, Linda, and James.
Alex, come here, dear.
Nervously, I took a couple of steps, and Linda waved me over kindly. Without Emily around, I felt like I was sitting on pins and needles. Linda held my hand, gently stroking it.
Alex, how did you sleep last night?
Quite well.
Robert and Linda exchanged a glance and smiled at each other.
That's good.
I glanced suspiciously at James, only to find his expression unusually grim. When I finished freshening up and came out for breakfast, James was standing at the door, and I ignored him. The next second, he pulled me into the bathroom and swiftly closed the door. Leaning against the door, James placed his hands on either side of me. I didn't dare to breathe, staring at him in shock. The next second, a flurry of kisses rained down on me, and my mind went blank.
You always said I was cold, didn't you? I was pretending, Alex. Every time I see you, I want to do this.
My face turned bright red in an instant. The James in front of me was so unfamiliar, completely different from the cold, aloof person I remembered. He held me tightly, sealing my lips with his. His aggressive approach made my head spin. When my eyes were dazed, James let go of me, opened the door, and carried me into the room right under Robert and Linda's noses. Like a fish on a chopping block, I was repeatedly tormented by him until my lips were swollen from kissing. Only then did James reluctantly let go of me and head to the bathroom. I chickened out and sneaked back to my room before he came out, hiding for the entire day. You can run, but you can't hide forever. James's image in my mind did a complete 180. From a cold, indifferent man, he turned into a big puppy who wanted to cuddle and kiss me all the time. Once again, he pinned me against the door and kissed me. Emily called for me from the living room, and somehow, James tricked me into the room again.
James, we've already broken up. Do you want things to be unclear?
Break up? I never agreed to that, never.
I admit I still couldn't let go of James, so every time he got emotional, I didn't push him away. But deep down, I didn't believe in love. It was like an unfillable void, and I never felt secure. But James slowly filled that void. During the year we dated, he gave me plenty of freedom, but he didn't know that I wanted to be hidden away, to be kept close, to see him anxious and passionate for me. In that year, I didn't know what James went through. From the moment we met again, he seemed like a different person. Very proactive, almost obsessive. For instance, he always appeared at crucial moments, always showed up when I was interacting with other men. Until half a year after we got back together, on James's birthday, he took me to a house he bought near the school. That house was filled with my photos, from high school to college graduation, every stage was there.
Look, Alex, every moment of you, with me.
James's cold image completely collapsed. That night, for the first time, he didn't just kiss me until he lost control. He was extremely excited, holding my hands, calling my name over and over. He even made me call him brother, husband, daddy. The year I was preparing for the college entrance exam, my sister often brought a girl home. The first time I saw her, she had her hair in a ponytail, and her face was flushed from being outside.
This is my friend. Isn't she sweet?
Hello, brother.
She softly called me brother in a sweet, gentle voice. I saw her often after that. Every time I was exhausted from studying, I would open the window and see her and Emily chatting and drinking tea in the yard.
For the first time, I felt that life is a verb.
I secretly took pictures of her every time she came to our house and kept them. The year she took the college entrance exam, I was in the living room when Emily asked her about her major.
What major are you planning to choose?
I'm not sure yet.
You should choose a major at a university.
It's a great place.
I was thrilled to see her at school as I had hoped. I created various chances to run into her and helped her whenever she needed it.
But on the surface, I remained cold. I was afraid my expressions would betray me, afraid she would know my feelings for her.
When she confessed to me, I was ecstatic, almost losing my mind with joy.
I like you.
I like you too.
But I didn't dare to hug her or hold her hand, fearing I would scare her away. That year, I started my own business and was very busy, but I still made time to go on dates with her.
She was so adorable. Watching her smile at me often made me lose control of my self-restraint.
But I never expected that one night she would suddenly break up with me and then disappear from my world.
We need to break up.
My career was at a critical stage, and I wanted to present myself in the best possible light to her, so I worked overtime like crazy. The company soon went public, and I made a fortune.
I bought a house near her school, but I never expected to see her again in such a situation.
She had been bullied and was crying so pitifully. My heart ached, but she was so cold towards me.
My girl was really brave, handling the bad guys so cleverly. I wanted to praise her, but the words stuck in my throat.
I added her on WeChat again, but she remained distant.
She's been through a lot. Give her some time.
I will.
I got information about her from Emily and went to a bar. When she saw me, she sat far away, breaking my heart.
She had once said she wanted a bear knight to protect her. I became that bear knight, but there was another man by her side.
Why are you here?
I used up half my energy to accompany her on amusement park rides, but she said I was too old, which stung.
I was late, and when I parked the car, I saw her get slapped. I finally understood what it meant to feel utterly devastated. That night, I canceled my collaboration with John, losing millions.
Money can be earned again, but I can't afford to lose her again.
Emily kept her around, and I gave Emily double the usual New Year's money. I had never felt my sister was so useful before. She was in the kitchen chatting with my mom. I pretended to get a soda, only to hear my mom trying to set her up with someone. I panicked. She seemed serious about it.
You should meet this nice young man.
I'll think about it.
That night, watching her make a wish on the fireworks, I really wanted to tell her how much I loved her. She got drunk, looking so cute and dazed. When she was drunk, she was like a little kitten, liking to nuzzle people.
I almost couldn't hold back.
I couldn't hold back. I pulled her into a long kiss, making up for all the lost time over the years. I deliberately carried her through the living room, hinting to my mom that she was mine.
Do you want something unclear?
I only want something clear and lasting, to grow old together.
I took her to that room near the school on my birthday. Watching her tremble beneath me, 7 years, a whole 7 years, my girl, body and soul, was finally mine.